Last year's NBA champions, the Toronto Raptors. Much of their success in the 2019 season was attributed to the dominance of Kawhi Leonard and particularly his influence in the postseason, where he averaged just short of 31 and came up clutch on so many occasions. Many will remember the infamous shot, which defied gravity and time, as he faded away from two oncoming defenders and made one of the most memorable shots of all time. But amongst the historic shot against the 76ers, Kawhi was an offensive and defensive force all throughout the playoffs, and was the reason the Raptors were able to beat out the 76ers in that very tight-fought second round series, averaging about 40 points in 3 of their 4 wins, and then continuing his prolific impact over the course of the next 2 series against the top seed Bucks and the reigning champions Golden State. So when Leonard decided to move back home to LA, the Raptors were no chance to repeat their heroic title run, right? They had lost their best player and potentially the league's best player alongside a very important starting 3-and-D player in Danny Green, and had seemingly failed to make the adequate moves to replace these two, or so we thought. They were still seen as a playoff team, but were expected to win anywhere from 15 to 20 games less than they had won the year prior. So it's ironic that in the 64 games they played before the NBA postponement, the Raptors had eclipsed the loftiest external expectations of them heading into the bubble. Quickly before I get into the video, if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be hugely appreciated. These videos do take a while to find all the necessary stats and do the necessary editing, so a like would be much appreciated. Anyways, let's get back into it. But how did they go about replacing their best player, and how can they repeat last year's heroics without last year's hero? Much has been made of Pascal Siakam's offensive leap, as he has had a major increase in offensive responsibility and production. But you can look at OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet, Norman Powell, and even a 33-year-old Kyle Lowry, who have all improved since last year and seen the team not skip a beat without the influence of one of the league's best players. The Raptors have been forced to trust all of their players' abilities to make shots with the reduction of isolation points provided by Kawhi Leonard, and this trust is evidenced by their top 10 assist percentage and assist to turnover ratio, suggesting they move the ball until they find the open man. But that's not just a suggestion, because the Raptors are tied for first with the Milwaukee Bucks in open 3 makes, and have the second best percentage in the league. Their offensive philosophy centered around moving the ball until you find the open man has worked to a treat thus far, and has worked against the best teams in the league as well, with the most recent win against the Lakers a testament to that. But a number of the questions surrounding the Raptors' ability to repeat their 2019 success has stemmed from the lack of a go-to closer, a player that you can give the ball to down the stretch when the opposition is locked in on defense and your team is struggling to get the looks you were getting earlier in the game. This is where the Raptors would have to defy the odds and history, with history suggesting the NBA's best teams have all had a designated superstar to give the ball to down the stretch. Toronto, on the other hand, continues to move the ball freely down the stretch, trusting in their players 1 through 5 to make critical shots at critical times, which has worked out for them thus far. In games that are separated by 5 points or less in the last 5 minutes of the game, the Raptors sit 22-12, which has them ranked as the 6th best team in the league during that time period. And even more impressive, their offense is the NBA's 2nd best during that period of time. Now, there is a lot of debate around the clutch statistic. Some believe there is no difference in a player's ability to score in the last 5 minutes of the game as opposed to the first 43, and it's just happenstance. However, I think most would disagree with this take. If a game is in the balance heading into the last 5 minutes, the defensive intensity is going to go up a notch. Coaches are going to be more involved, using all their remaining timeouts to call set plays that they have spent hours perfecting in practice. In addition to this, how often do we see a major increase in isolations throughout the last few minutes of the game, as offenses often become far more stagnant and look to their star player for scoring? This is where the Raptors' philosophy could separate them from the pack, for better or for worse. So far this season, they have continued to move the ball at a good rate at the end of the game in close situations, and it has worked. Just take their last 5 minutes of the most recent game versus one of the most fancied teams in the NBA, the LA Lakers. Kyle Lowry was huge down the stretch, making several clutch shots and clutch free throws, but their continued ball movement saw Anunoby make corner threes and get to the rim. Van Vliet and Siakam also came up with buckets, and no player looked afraid of the moment. Something that can't be said about a lot of teams I've seen play down the stretch. Whether this will continue into the playoffs, I just can't say. It would be purely speculative for me to assume, but the argument against the Raptors not having a player that can close out games for them is a lazy take based on how they've performed this season without that go-to guy, quotation marks. Defense, defense, defense. It's no secret that you need to be a good defensive team to win championships. NBA history has shown that, and looking at the teams most favorited to win the title this year, nothing seems like changing. The three most fancied teams in the NBA are three of the 5 best defenses, with the Boston Celtics and Raptors being amongst that elite group. What do all of these teams have in common? Defensive versatility. You can often pinpoint 1 or 2 elite defenders on a team and say that is the reason behind their defensive success. But all 5 of these teams have defense at every position. You can look at the Milwaukee Bucks, who are anchored by the future Defensive Player of the Year in Giannis Antetokounmpo. Surrounding Giannis, they have Lopez, Bledsoe, Middleton, and so on. These are all quality defenders and can impact a game on the defensive end of the floor, as well as the offensive end of the floor. You then look at the Celtics, Lakers, and Clippers, and you can say the exact same about all 3 of those teams. Each team having their own standout defenders, but surrounding those defenders with good defenders in their own right. But the Raptors are even more unique and exceptional in their own right than these other defensive-minded teams. You don't look at Toronto and see an exceptional defender elevating them above the rest of the pack. You can look at Kyle Lowry, one of the 3 to 4 best guard defenders in the league. He hustles over and around screens regularly and is the best in the league at getting in position to take charges, showing absolutely no fear taking the contact, but the praise you heap on Lowry for his defensive ability can be heaped onto a number of their other players. In fact, you could argue players 1 through 8 in their rotation are all defensive pluses. This is a team full of high-intensity, switchable players that know their system inside out and have no problem switching onto any matchup, which is evident as they rank 1st in the league for opposition 3-point percentage and 2nd in the league for opposition field goal percentage, only trailing the Milwaukee Bucks. Buckets don't come easy against the Raptors. It's hard not to be reactionary following their performance against the Lakers, but I would hardly call it reactionary because they have shown an ability to shut down opposing teams' best players all season long, and that continued into their matchup against LA. OG Anunoby had the assignment of guarding LeBron James, and he did to great effect for the majority of the game. A couple of times OG got caught flat-footed as LeBron blew by him to the rim, but that's one of the greatest players of all time, so it's hardly inexcusable to get blown by on a few occasions. But overall, you could see Anunoby really relished the opportunity to guard the King one-on-one, and he chose to go over multiple screens to stay in front of James, and to work to the benefit of the Raptors, as they kept him well below his season averages in points and assists. Having a go-to wing defender to fill the void left by Kawhi is crucial, and OG has been able to fill the void all season long, ranking as one of the best isolation defenders in the league, just below, you guessed it, Kawhi Leonard. But this is made even more impressive when you consider he often has to go against the opposition's best offensive player. But the praise for the Raptors' young star doesn't stop there. Not only did he prove great at defending threes, he also spent a combined 76% of his time guarding every other position on the floor, emphasizing his versatility and suggesting he is the epitome of a player that can guard positions 1 through 5, a trait that will be so huge for the Raptors come playoff time. Now, this team has proven they can stop the opposition's star bigs as well. We saw it today with Anthony Davis, getting bodies in front of him and harassing him into a forced shot or ill-advised decision. They got into him early in the game and disrupted his flow, which he never recovered from. In fact, it was the first time in his career, yes that's right, ever, that he had spent a 12-minute quarter scoreless, failing to score at all throughout a 12-minute stint in the first. A truly fantastic defensive performance from all the players involved and the mastermind behind the scenes in Nick Nurse. Now this point obviously ties into Giannis Antetokounmpo. We saw Toronto cause him and the Bucks absolute headaches in last year's playoffs with their ability to create a wall in front of him and use their numerous big bodies to prevent him from forcing his way into the paint like he so often does. And there's nothing to suggest the Raptors won't be capable of stopping the back-to-back MVP again. You look at OG, Serge, Pascal, Gasol, and even Rondé Hollis-Jefferson. These are all guys that have the capability to stay in front of Giannis, and the cohesion of the team will ensure help comes before he can get himself into a rhythm, very similar to how they played Anthony Davis. An underrated aspect of the NBA is cohesion. How well you know your teammates on the court is critical, particularly in late game situations. Do you have trust that your teammate will make the right rotation at a critical time to ensure the opposition does not get an open look? Do you have faith that your teammate will be spotting up in the corner, ready to knock down the three after you drive and kick? The Raptors appear to have such an incredible amount of confidence in each of their teammates on the offensive and defensive side of the floor, and you can see why when they constantly move the ball around until they find the open man, and as I previously mentioned, more often than not, that open man knocks down his three-point opportunity, just adding to the trust and confidence. This Toronto team has everything. They don't have the robot freak Kawhi Leonard anymore, but they have the best coach in the league, a defensive unit that is strong 1 through 8, and a trust in all of their teammates that sees them always take the right option. They've been slept on for most of the season, and I was expecting to see them win against the Lakers, which they were able to do. I feel after a performance like that, they won't be slept on for much longer, and there's a number of reasons why this team could go all the way. They are still the champions after all. Going back to back would be something special. That's still a long way away, but there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic if you're a Raps fan. If you made it to the end of the video, you might as well finish your stay here by dropping a like. It helps the channel a lot and lets me know you enjoy this type of content. Have a good day. Laters.